Both 3 Days of the Condor and Bobby Deerfield seem to be that kind of big Hollywood packaged deal type of picture, as opposed to some of your more quote personal unquote type of works.
Well, 3 Days of the Condor, I don't know. 3 Days of the Condor is one of the better received critically of my films. I think Deerfield probably you could say that about, but Condor I don't know. Condor ended up being a pretty respectable film artistically, at least if you listen to New York critics. I think it may have started out that way, but it didn't end up that way. Somehow Condor exceeded itself. I think it began with Bob and I wanting to have some fun. That's really what it was. We kept saying, why are we always grappling with these horrendous themes and all this heavyweight stuff? Let's just go out and shoot a movie that's fun. It's contemporary, let's do this. That was when it was 6 Days of the Condor, and it was just a kind of frivolous James Bond romp. And then, as is our wont, once we sat down and started to work with it and really pull the scenes apart, and again pulled David Rayfield in, I think it transformed itself into something else. That film is rather extraordinary of all the films I've done, that and Jeremiah, in the sense that that film has played out all of its runs and all of its reruns on cable and on one network, half of its runs and reruns on a second network, and still plays prime time on a prime network and gets a box around it in the New York Times and gets high rating. It gets one of the best bets box around it, when it just did 3 Sundays ago or whatever when it was on. And that's an old film now, it's 7 years old. And that film I was asked to have open the New York Film Festival, but I couldn't convince Paramount to let it go to open the New York Film Festival. So I don't know if I would call it a big Hollywood package precisely. Again, that may have been how it started out. Bobby Deerfield, perhaps, although I didn't think of it as that. Bobby Deerfield was a film that Paul Newman brought to me just before I made 3 Days of the Condor. I had just made The Yakuza, and it was a flop, and I was petrified to make Bobby Deerfield. I loved it, but I was afraid to make it. So I went off and did Condor. When Condor started to do money, and make money, I dug out Deerfield. Deerfield is a film that I would have paid money to do, probably, which just goes to show you should never listen to me. It wasn't a big Hollywood deal film. Nobody wanted to make it. I mean, studios were not clamoring for it by a long shot. They considered it a downer. It was something I wanted very much to make, and at that time, at the time that I wanted to make it, Newman couldn't make it, so I had to talk Al into doing it. I still don't know what happened on that film. It's to this day somewhat baffling. I suppose I'll understand it. Somehow it just, everything went wrong, I guess, in a way that I don't honestly understand. Did the same thing on that film I've done on every other film.
Although I know that The Electric Horseman had script problems, I think that the fact that much of, as you mentioned earlier, the fact that your relationship with Redford, you were able to bring out a lot of that kind of
Electric Horseman, I literally ended up writing half of every night before we would shoot. We make jokes now about my saying, let's pick the longest location because I'll have time to write the scene by the time we get there. And that's literally true. There are yellow pads all over the place. We're riding out to work in the morning. I would do the scene. Poor Jane would come back, and we shut down Christmas for 2 weeks, and she came back and she said, everybody's asking me how's this thing going to end? And I keep saying, I don't know. She said, am I going to stay with him, or am I not going to stay with him, or what's going to happen? We didn't even, none of us knew.
Just like Casablanca.
Yeah, right, right.
Well, that's, I think, responsible for a lot of the spontaneity of the thing.
Yeah, we really didn't know. I mean, that was a film that was sort of made day by day, in a way. It really was. That was something Redford and I got ourselves in real trouble. We had wanted to make another film called A Place to Come To, and we couldn't get it made. We had to abandon it. We had a crew hired, and everybody hired, so we were under the gun. We had to take a film. That was a project that Ray Stark owned, was laying around. We grabbed it, and then realized that we had to do an awful lot of fixing, and we had to start. So we were in the middle of it before we had 20 pages.